swear any testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
You may be seated. Counsel, you may inquire when you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, would you state your name and spell your name for the court reporter, please?
Yes, my name is Lieutenant Spencer Williams-Hurley. My last name is spelled Williams-Hurley.
Thank you. You've given us many hints and suggestions, but I'll nevertheless ask for the record. What do you do for work?
I'm a police officer.
And where are you currently employed?
Currently, I'm a patrol lieutenant with the Rochester Police Department.
And I'd like to ask you to give just a brief overview, if you will, a summary of your professional training and experience.
Strictly regarding law enforcement?
Correct.
Okay. So in 2014, I got hired by the Rochester Police Department, went to the police academy, which is about 4 months long. During that time, I also ended up going to SWAT 1 and 2. I'm a SWAT team leader. And then along with that, I've gone to several medical courses regarding emergency trauma.
And can you describe your progression through rank? You just referred, I think, to yourself as a lieutenant, which is
Yep.
a different change in rank even from the April 4th of last year.
Yes. Yep. So initially when I got hired on, I was a patrolman handling all sorts of various calls, whatever those may be, from stabbing, shootings, assaults, domestic violence, and the normal things that you're familiar with. As a patrol sergeant, you get set in charge of whatever's happening on your shift. Right? So you're the ultimate catch for liability, legality, policy violations, things along those lines, and you're kind of, for lack of a better way to say it, the parent of the shift. Right? I think almost decision will come through me. As a lieutenant, it's even more so. There's much more of a legal aspect to it as opposed to I'm no longer stopping cars. If that makes sense.
Just briefly revisit that. So how long were you stopping cars as a patrol?
So I did that for about 6 years. I was a sergeant for about a year and a half, and then I became a lieutenant.
And to be clear, my understanding is patrol is a little bit more than just stopping cars. Did you respond to serious offenses over that period?
I've been through everything from attempted homicides, robberies, domestic violence cases, child abuse, child pornography, the litany of good and bad aspects of law enforcement.
All right. And not to get too far in the weeds and to frankly move on soon, you had mentioned to the jury that you had gone to the academy before you were hired. Can you just briefly summarize what that means in New Hampshire when an officer goes to the academy?
Yep. So at the time I went through the academy, again, it was 16 weeks. It was a live-in academy. Monday through Friday, you're there the entire time. Think of a less militaristic boot camp. During that time, we have training at all hours, both physical, academic. We have basic first aid. We have more advanced first aid, as well as the investigation of crimes, crime scene management, crime scene processing, mental health, and basically all aspects of our job. Following that, you have the field training period where you're with a senior officer, and that's kind of when you hone those skills in an on-the-job training kind of environment.
And finally, in addition to kind of the strictly law enforcement training experience, do you have additional training and experience that is integrated with, parallel to, relevant to your work in terms of medical training?
Yeah. So prior to becoming a police officer, I was in the military. I was a Navy corpsman for 6 years. What a Navy corpsman is, it's a medical field for both the Navy and the Marine Corps. During my time, I was attached to a Marine Corps infantry battalion. I did multiple combat tours with that. That part of that training, we have a 16-week hospital corpsman school. That's where we learn our basic functions in the medical field for the military. Following that, there's an additional 8 weeks of assignment to go to the Marine Corps side of things. During that time, it is entirely battlefield trauma, right? So gunshot wounds, stabbings, explosions, tourniquets, chest seals, trying to keep people alive until we can get them to a higher level of care, like a field hospital or an air medevac. From there, I also went to something called Operational Emergency Medical Skills. That's a 2-week course where we have more non-traditional methodologies for keeping people alive. I'm not going to go into the details of some of it, but it is a very advanced, it is very rigorous, and it is a very intense course where we have everything from your line level people that work in a hospital all the way up to high tier special operations that go through this course. It's a real eye opener for a lot of people. And the main focus of that is being able to keep people alive as long as possible, because if we look at the human body as essentially like a plumbing system, right? How do we keep those pipes intact, right? And running as best as we can. With that, I had multiple combat tours to both Fallujah, Ramadi, and places where there was an extreme amount of combat. As a result, seeing a large number of, battlefield type injuries. I've also taught it hundreds of hours. I've probably taught tourniquets more frequently than I've made my own dinner in a lot of ways. I've been teaching thousands of people that for, at this point, probably the last 16 to close to 20 years.
Officer, I'd like to turn your attention to April 4th of last year. Were you on duty?
I was.
And did you become involved in this case, which I think you're familiar with, as State versus Jason Levesque?
Yes, we were at the station. I was going over some of the information with my sergeants for how that shift had gone prior to that. And then that's when we heard the call come over both the radio and the overhead dispatch.
And briefly describe your response, if you would.
I found with the other sergeants that were with me that night, because some of them were in a shadowing period, and we headed directly to that call.
Well, we may see some body cam, so just can you clarify that shadowing period, what you're talking about?
Yep. So similar, remember how I said that after the academy, we go through a field training period. So when someone gets promoted from patrolman to sergeant, they'll spend a little bit of time with either a senior sergeant or a lieutenant, kind of just showing, think of it almost like an FTO period, but it's not about how to do the job, it's more about the nuances of that position, right? So who we're going to be notifying in certain situations, the requirements of them changes from when they're a patrolman, right? It's more the overall scene as opposed to an individual task more often than not.
And I'm sorry for that kind of side piece there. I just want to return to April 4th. You said that you received a call. What was the nature of the call?
From what I remember, it said that, someone had called in and said that there were 4 shots and that their boyfriend was shot in the face. And usually when a call comes in, we only get a little snippet of the conversation that person had either with a 911 dispatcher or with our dispatcher.
How quickly did you respond after receiving that call?
Instantly, a matter of seconds.
And do you know whether other officers responded potentially before you even?
They did, yep. So as we were leaving the building, you could already hear lights and sirens, the sirens, leaving the parking lot, heading in that direction.
Would you please offer us a narrative of the events, your actions that you took from this point moving forward, please?
Yep, so as soon as I got with my other sergeants, we got into the supervisor's vehicle. The drive was very short. We're talking maybe a quarter of a mile in reality. Light sirens as fast as we could, got over there. As I'm pulling up, I could see officers taking a man into custody at gunpoint. At that point, my focus is I have 2 sergeants with me. I know exactly how they're going to handle this situation. I know that I have an experience in medical, and I'm going to take advantage of that at that time. So we had already kind of distributed tasks while we were driving up there, and then I immediately started looking for who may be with a potential victim.
Were you able to find who you later learned to be Kyle Violette at the scene?
I did.
Can you describe where it is you found him?
On the sidewalk, kind of between a snowbank, there's the height of the snowbank and the nature of the light, and there was a storm going at the time. Was kind of hiding in a little bit of shadow, so at first it didn't quite register what was there. But I saw him laying on his back, head towards me, and I could see a fair amount of blood both on the sidewalk and on the snowbank beside him.
And after identifying somebody clearly in need of medical attention, what did you do?
Started trying to treat. So putting on gloves at that point in time, because again, if I don't know that person, we have to provide basic, protection for ourselves as well. So I started applying gloves. And then at that point, part of the treatment is trying to expose the wounds as much as possible to see exactly what we're dealing with.
Were there other officers adjacent or assisting you in this process?
There were.
And can you then describe for us, just with a narrative, what it is you did, what it is you saw?
Yep. So when I started, right off the bat, the obvious injuries, there was a wound to the left side of the jaw, which was very clearly a bullet hole. It also looked as though the round might have been lodged higher up in the cheek. As I exposed the torso, I started seeing a couple different holes, one on the lower right abdomen, one on the left rib cage, one on the upper part of the body near the collarbone on the left-hand side. We start trying to see what we're going to do for treatment of that. I couldn't see anything clearly that would say an extremity hemorrhage that would be like a tourniquet or something along those lines. So the idea is, if you kind of look at the torso, when there's a bleed or there's a hole there, the idea is you're trying to plug that hole as quick as possible. So your gloved hand will go over something like that. It prevents, one, oxygen from going into the cavity in case the lung collapses, and it also tries to prevent as much blood as possible from coming out. So if you think of it like a water balloon with small holes in it, you're trying to plug those holes as best as possible.
And you just described, as by my count, 1, 2, 3, 4 wounds. Did you examine the lower part of his body? Were you able to do that at the scene, given the time and circumstances?
No. We were able to just get a rough idea of how much blood might have been there, and there was nothing to indicate at the time an arterial bleed that would have needed immediate attention, as opposed to the things more at the realm of his lungs. I also knew that we had EMS fairly quickly on the way. He was laying in the snow at that point in time, so there is an element of keeping them out of the snow and trying to keep them as warm as possible, given the scenario.
Can you tell us about any actual steps, interventions you took medically to either stabilize or to address the wounds that you did see?
Yep. So right off the bat, as I said, we're trying to keep as much of the fluid in the body and as much air out of the body as possible. So right off the bat, you go ahead and you cover those holes with a hand, gloved hand, things along those lines. When I lifted up his shirt and we started cutting away the shirt, I saw a hole up in the upper collarbone. My concern at that point in time is directly in that area, you have the subclavian vein, which is like a garden hose of the vein, where if that gets nicked, it can actually bleed quite profusely. When doing that, I actually take my fingers, which are gloved, and stick them into the wound to try to feel if I can see if there's blood coming from a particular location. That's also a benefit, because it's kind of like the little boy sticking his finger in the well. We're trying to keep everything in there, and that's, frankly, a good way to do it. When we do that, I roll him over, and try and check to see if there's any exit wounds. Again, at this point, we just know somebody was shot. I don't necessarily know the caliber. I don't know the power. I don't know if there is going to create an exit wound or if it's going to stay inside the body. So we're at least going to check. Didn't notice anything on the back, but that's also when we started noticing something on like the lower hip. Eventually, we also roll him over onto his side because he does have blood going into his mouth. I don't want him aspirating or bringing that into his lungs. So by allowing him to lay on his side as long as possible, it allows the blood to come out of the mouth and maintain an airway so that he can continue to try to talk and continue to breathe on his own.
At this juncture, while you were making these observations and interventions, are you making determinations about exit wounds and entry wounds, or not at this point?
Yes. So this is a constant evaluation. Again, this is one of those things that happens in the dark during a blizzard. A lot of things going on at one time that are kind of dividing attention. So it's a constant reevaluation. So one, are things that we are doing working? Also, are there new information that we're getting, such as locating an exit wound? Or from the time I got there to the time we are at that moment, has additional blood pooled up in the area? So it's a constant evaluation, both of those reasons, and then if we do something, which in one case we started putting chest seals on, which, think of it like a plastic dressing, right? Nothing can get in or out of it. By putting those on, making sure that those are working as well and they're staying in place.
So were you wearing a body-worn camera while you responded to this scene?
I was. It sits right here.
Is it on
No, but it does sit right there.
Sorry. Look, would seeing the images from your body-worn camera accurately depict some of these issues you've described and the degree and nature of these injuries?
Yes.
Your Honor, may we?
Yeah.
We'd like to shift to that.
Sure. So while we're doing that, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to give you instruction because I anticipate that children will see part of this video, and I want to warn you that this video does contain some graphic images. But as you will be told at the end of this case, part of my instructions are going to be that you are not to decide this case based upon passion or sympathy or emotion, but you're to decide this case based upon the facts and the law. And to the extent that seeing any of this arouses any sympathy or passion or emotion in you, I'm going to ask you to set those feelings aside, and that you are not to rely upon any such feelings or sympathy or bias or emotion in reaching your verdict at the end of this case. Your verdict is to be based on the facts and upon the law. All right, and with that, we will continue on.
Sir, Your Honor, with the court's permission, may this witness step into the well?
Yes, and I will move myself.
Your voice seems to carry quite well. I want you to provide a mic possibly to assist the appropriate. This may be another situation, Your Honor, where the lights would help.
And counsel, just to be clear, this is in for ID at this point, correct?
I construed your order, Your Honor, as a full exhibit.
Well, my ruling was based on...
I understand. So foundation.
Foundation, exactly. Foundation has not been established.
I understand, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Lieutenant, we're showing you an additional still frame. Can you identify that?
Yes, so that would be Summer Street to the right. There's a victim sitting right there. That's the snowbank next to the...
Victim, you just used the term right there. Can I, for the record, just clarify, it appears to be in the sidewalk area adjacent to both a house and a utility pole?
Yes.
Okay. And this is essentially, you just pointed out your body-worn camera, the perspective of you on this scene, literally the view from your chest.
Yes.
Counsel, I'd ask you to flow.
Sorry, can we roll down a little center?
Can you stop right here for a second?
Thank you.
Counsel, do you want to make a record, or do you want...
No, I mean, I just want to make sure we're clear here. This is still ID that's being played to the jury.
Right.
The ID has
Very
to
well.
be stricken with it.
Correct. Before you go any further,
I understand. So, sir, does this appear to be a fair and accurate representation depicted by your body-worn camera?
Yes, this is the same thing.
That body-worn camera, can you confirm the protocol in terms of preserving it for evidence?
Yes, so the moment that we finish up any type of call, basically a couple things happen. So when we shut this off, it asks us to say that it has a particular type of file. So it could be accidental, a traffic stop, a case file, or something like that. I select case file because we know it's going to go into a case. And then when we get back to the station, it gets uploaded basically into the cloud, into our servers, and then we can assign that specifically to a case with a particular case number that has a unique identifier.
And did you take those steps in this case?
I did.
Your Honor, I move to strike the ID and move this video in as a full exhibit.
any objection?
With the same reservations and with the same instruction.
Understood. The ID will be stricken. It's a full exhibit.
Thank you. Counselor?
No, and he just said just like that. Hey, hold on. He just here. Fuck. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, cover. You got another. I'm gonna get back in. Oh, sorry. You're gonna get taser. Okay. Do we have anything on the front? Randy. Hey, I'm gonna run. Hey, I'm gonna roll you onto your back. Okay. Move your legs. Move your leg. Move your leg. Okay. Now roll over to the side. What else we got? So I'm gonna go ahead and keep this one covered. Okay. Hey, you got abdomen, but got the abdomen as well. Right here. Yep. Let's go one right here. Okay. Sorry, buddy. Sorry, buddy. Here, take that. Here, hold on, buddy. Can we get a little bit of gauze? So, do we have any gauze to put on his head? No. Hey. Should we guys have that? Hey, David, do you have to grab your leg? Can you go ahead and start cutting the rest of the shirt, please? That's fine. Okay, that's the shirt. Yeah, grab that. Grab that, Sarah.
I just need someone to start cutting the rest of his shirt. Okay? Yep. Man, you need to back up.
Get back there, don't
Yeah, back up.
stand by the building, please. I'm gonna stand by the building. Jason!
Hey! Stand back here. Hey, we're going ahead. We're helping you out. We're helping you
Stay
out,
as close as
okay?
you can, okay? EMS is on their way.
Hey, make sure his head gets tilted to the side.
Just gotta put your head to the side.
There. Get your foot. Get your foot.
I hear a voice in the background and you directing to turn him onto his side. Can you explain why you were doing that?
Yes. So as you can see, especially from the beginning of the video towards this point, because he's laying on his back, that some of the blood is draining into his mouth. And you can see when he starts to talk, it starts to kind of come down his cheek. My idea is when you roll him onto his side, it allows that to drain. Typically with chest injuries, we try to be careful with how we're going to be moving somebody, because especially if it's bleeding internally, we have to watch which way that blood is going to start pulling inside the body. So while we're applying these things, while we're cutting his shirt off, I don't want him laying on his side, because again, we have a hook that's ripping his clothes. I don't want to accidentally make anything. So as long as we can keep on his back, we're going to, and then once we start seeing a little bit of blood forming in his mouth, we're moving him onto his side in order to allow that blood to come out.
There has been, I think, some reference to packing injuries. I note that there was some attention drawn to the abdomen. What does that mean to pack a wound?
So when we start talking, especially when like the hips, the shoulders, and those kind of areas, something like a tourniquet's not going to work, right? It doesn't have an ability to squeeze the blood vessel against the bone to shut off the blood flow. So we have to find alternative methods. When I first was able to lift his shirt up, and I noticed when I'm in his collar, you'll see my hand move up, and I actually stick my fingers into the wounds to try to do exactly that. I'm trying to provide pressure inside the wound to prevent it from further bleeding. That's not a thing that I can reasonably continue to do for a long period of time, right? Unless I followed him all the way to the hospital and to the surgery room, that's not going to work. So the idea is that we would take something like gauze, right, or specifically something called combat gauze, which has an anticoagulant in it, or sorry, it actually has a clotting agent, embedded in the gauze. And what we do is we pack it and try to fill that space up as much as possible to prevent that bleeding. Otherwise, if that bleed continues, it continues to form inside the body, pooling like a traditional internal bleed that you would think. And that might require, and that almost always requires surgical intervention to get it to stop, at risk of continuing to bleed unchecked.
Councilman, can you please?
I'm going to roll him to the side as soon as that's clear. Okay? So I'm going to roll. Yep. So I'm going to do this and cover here. Go ahead, keep your mouth open. All right, any blood we're going to go ahead and let roll out of your mouth. All right, buddy? Yeah, I don't see anything here. Go ahead, get your glass open.
He has any
Currently, I don't know.
oh, in his jaw.
Yeah, that's okay, though. That's okay. Don't see anything else here. Oh, hold on, Mike.
Try and stay still, okay?
So we have a sharp punch up to the upper chest,
And
one
then
under
lower
my hand.
abdomen.
We also have your lower abdomen.
No, please take care.
And once you get your grip on,
I have one still right there.
okay, ready? Okay, so that's that one. Yep, so we got one on the abdomen. There's one under my hand as well, my right hand, but it's covered up by the sweatshirt.
Okay, is there an
Just has one to the face. Yeah, there's one to the face and the jaw.
Okay.
Okay? So I haven't had a chance to get over those two.
What's your name? Come here.
I have some.
I got my pocket.
He's still Hey, stay with me, okay? Just stay with me, all right? Yes, ma'am. Okay? Just stay with us, okay? EMS is here, all right?
So can you with your left hand, can you go ahead and slide his arm out of the sweatshirt?
Ma'am, you need to stop asking us questions right now. Okay, he's still breathing. Upper chest, lower abdomen, and his jaw. His left side of his jaw. Turn her head.
this side, so you can cut that drain out.
Yeah.
Okay? I don't see any accidents on the back at all. We haven't really checked the other side, but we have enough pressure with the water there, so I'm gonna get through. Right under my hand, there's one under this hand as well.
So you need another.
Right,
There's
feel
a
it?
chest one right behind you. Right there. There's one extra in there. Right up. No, left. Right there.
Yep, right there.
And there's probably some stuff in there if you need it, but stay in your house, sir. Stay in your house. In the first aid bag on either the left-hand side or right-hand side. No, you're gonna be okay, all right? Just stay with us. They're here. They're gonna help you. That's fine. We have more tests. We have some on the truck. So we're gonna lift you, okay?
Okay, I'll hold under his head. Bring something on that arm. 1, 2, 3. You want to slide it further down? His head's hanging low. Alright. So we got right under it here as well, but there's nothing, I couldn't feel any kind of pressure from the middle.
So what can I got?
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, you may return to the witness stand. I'll ask it this way, why did you do the things you did there in this instance?
They would have been medically necessary. If in a lot of those circumstances, especially the abdomen bleed or the upper chest bleed, one of the concerns that we have is like most things, when there's that initial impact of a high velocity bullet, right? The body does have a mechanism of self-protection, right? Muscles are it's almost like when you hit your elbow really hard on the table, right? The muscle contracts. And what can that happen is that can prevent blood flow from going for a little while. But when the body starts to relax or you've lost enough blood, it then opens up like floodgates. So those kind of interventions are medically necessary to keep a person alive long enough to be able to actually get to a hospital.
I was going to ask, to what degree of medical necessity, but you just stated that this was to keep him alive.
Yes.
Do you consider that a fair assessment based on your training and experience and what you witnessed there?
I do.
We just watched, I believe, the very end of that the video depicts you transferring this patient now to EMS, right?
Yes.
EMTs. And at that point, did your involvement medically essentially cease?
Correct.
Can you just briefly summarize then your involvement following Mr. Violette being taken to the hospital?
Yep, I assisted in cordoning off the area. I contacted the support captain to try to get our detective bureau started to come out, because at that point our main focus is scene security. I don't want anyone in or out. I want to preserve the scene as much as possible and then pass it on to a higher level investigation, because the amount of time necessary to further this goes often beyond the capabilities of patrol, and we want to move it to our detective bureau.
Did you participate in or make any orders to protect the integrity of the scene?
Besides further or improving the tape barrier, nope. Sergeant Smith was able to handle the majority of that.
You're the first person to refer to the tape barrier, so can you just clarify that?
Yep, so it's just your traditional crime scene tape around the outside. The idea is we make it as large as possible because we can always shrink it after the fact. And that was one of the things that I had done, is make the scene larger to make sure we isolate as much of the original evidence as possible.
And following your efforts to communicate information on to detectives, secure the scene, did you play any additional role that night?
No.
And essentially, it sounds like you passed it on to the detectives. Did they show up?
They did.
Okay.
Way better.
If I could just have a minute. Sir, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Attorney Sisti, I think you've met, have some questions as well.
Thank you.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon.
First, I just want to say that was a really great job you guys did.
Thank you.
And your community should be really proud of you, honestly.
Thank you very much.
During the course of the emergency treatment there, and you explained it great to the jury, by the way, we were hearing Kyle say things to you. That's generally a very good thing to hear when you're in that situation, correct?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
He was responding to some of the things you were saying, right?
Correct.
What kind of things was he responding to, just so we can get a better idea?
Well, one of the main focuses is when we talk to people. One is to reassure them. That helps stave off shock a little bit. It also, you want people to continue to have the will to fight, to go further. So by constantly reassuring, you keep that interaction. It also allows me to establish the integrity of his airway, right? Because if he can talk, I understand that at least something can go in and out, right? And then also, a lot of times what we'll do is people know where they've been hurt. So especially in the beginning of the video, you hear him repeatedly saying, "My face, my face, my face."
Okay, so he was, thank God, he was conscious, and he was at least responding to some degree.
Yes.
He was able to articulate certain aspects of his injuries and point to where he believed he was shot.
Correct.
And that was 7 minutes or so, and he was able to sustain, it wasn't a great level of communication, but some level of communication all the way until loading him onto the ambulance.
Yes, and that's pretty common, especially with gunshot wound victims in the torso, is they usually stay conscious.
Okay,
Yep.
great. Thanks again.
Absolutely.
The fact that he could say the way he said it, I mean, we could hear it, the way he said, my face, does that change your view at all about the likelihood he would die if there wasn't serious medical intervention?
It's not so much exactly what he's saying, but it's how what he says changes over time. In the beginning, he was saying, "My face, my face, my face." When he's rolled onto his side, it eventually changed to, "I'm dying." And what that is as one of a big symptom of something called a tension pneumothorax, which is where the lung collapses and pressure slowly builds up in that chest cavity, which is one of the main reasons why we covered that wound to prevent air from going in, is this sense of impending doom, right? So this anxiety, because slowly you're losing the ability to take full breaths. You're not getting as much oxygen. You've lost blood, so you're not able to get it enough through your tissues, right? The perfusion of oxygen through your tissues. So what happens is it's a slow onset of anxiety that's very common with both bleeding out and with severe trauma where you're slowly suffocating to death.
Those are my questions.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Steve, your next witness, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Officer Tiana Adams.